What is innovation? It has many definitions, and they're all important. Innovation can be described as identifying or creating a brand new technology. The telephone is an example of this. Innovation can also be defined as taking existing technologies and putting them together in a new combination. The bicycle is a classic example of this. Or innovation can also be defined as redefining the social meanings around a piece of technology and understanding how they're actually used by a group of individuals. A good example of this is the Wii Fitness. The technology was designed to present video games primarily for a group of younger males, but what we did in this particular case is to go out and redefine the meaning of that existing technology as a fitness tool for a different marketplace. Same technology, different meaning for it. So there are a variety of different definitions of innovation that we can talk about. Why is innovation important? In Europe, for example, they talk a lot about the European gap, which is defined as a very strong ability to do basic research in the natural sciences, for example. So you have CERN in Europe, but a weaker ability to take the results of this wonderful research and bring it to the market in terms of products and services that people will actually pay for. And this is often called the European gap. So how do we address this? In a variety of ways, but it's, as policymakers and business managers have realized, it's important that processes of commercialization, that is, developing a sustainable and valid business plan around technology, is just as important as doing the basic research itself. Consider the fact that, well, the vast majority of all patents on innovations, on inventions, on techniques that are found in our basic research institutions are never ever used. Most of them stay on the shelf and collect dust. So the question that a lot of policymakers have is how to take these patents, identify them, put them together in the right combinations, and bring them to market in a bundle of product or service that will provide value to people and people will actually pay for. This is not an easy question to answer. And so when we say what is innovation, innovation is more than a new technology, but it's taking a new technology and creating a system of use and a potential marketplace where it actually is used. So it's this additional level of bringing something to market. So where does innovation come from? And there are a variety of answers to this. One of the classic responses, of course, is innovations come from the people who are using technology. And this is what we call user-led innovation. And many studies have been done about this. So the people who are confronted with a problem while using the technology are the best ones to figure out solutions to these problems. So studies have been done in terms of surgeons or other scientists or people in a context of using a technology. They're faced with a problem and they have to fix it in the here and now. This is what we call user-led innovation, this tweaking, this tinkering like an engineer might do. At the other extreme, we have what we might call top-down innovation. This is research and invention that is done in the big scientific laboratories that we know from General Electric, from Siemens, from Philips. This top-down approach is also very useful and valid for many types of problems. So, for example, if you want to put a satellite up in space, you're better off going with a very mature scientific research institution and following a top-down approach for addressing those specific technical problems and creating a solution that actually works. Most of this type of innovation we know comes out of military funding, and what we call big science was a product of the Second World War and the Cold Wars, and pushing this military spending has pushed this very top-heavy, financially intensive innovation model and demonstrated its success many, many times again. At the same token, we are confronted today with some tremendously successful innovations such as the internet or SMS text messaging, in which no scientist in his white lab coat had ever thought of. They were in fact accidents. And many companies today are embracing this idea that most of the good innovations can be accidents, and secondly, they're probably not going to be discovered within our own company. So a new paradigm of innovation is coming along, what we might call open innovation, which embraces this idea that companies need to look outwards to understand different sources of innovation and different contexts in which they can combine them to create value for people. The classic history of open innovation was coined by Professor an Esade professor named Henry Chesborough, and he was doing some work at the Palo Alto Research Center called Xerox PARC. And what he noticed was that Xerox, as a manufacturer of copy machines, was producing some wonderful technologies at Xerox PARC. We know them as Ethernet, the basic protocol for much of the local area networks that we use. Another example is the PostScript technologies that are the basis for Adobe. And these technologies came out of Xerox PARC, but Xerox never made any money off of them. And his question was, well, why could this be the case? And the answer was, Xerox didn't see these technologies as having a role in their core business, which was the reproduction of paper copies, so they simply ignore them. Well, as history has shown us, these people have gone off to earn lots of money in either 3Com or Adobe or other areas. So the idea at this point was, if the company had skills in what they call open innovation, that is, not being so internally focused, but having the ability to take these innovations and spin them out and recombine them, they would have benefited from them. But in fact, that's not what they did. They had a very internal looking perspective on their business. So what is open innovation? Well, open innovation can be open source movements, other forms of crowdsourcing movements, and these have proven to be very, very successful. So within technology, the largest and most successful operating system today is Linux. That's a pure open source product. No one owns Linux. It belongs to everyone, and it's proof of the value of an open source concept. There are a variety of other intermediary forms of open innovation. So for example, many of you have iPhones or Apple devices of sorts. This is what we would call a platform strategy, where Apple would create the basic technology platform, but open up its ecosystems to third-party developers. So many of the apps that you use on your iPhone or your iPad are not written by Apple themselves. They're written by single individuals or teams of individuals, but independent people like you or I, and Apple goes in and checks the quality of them and then certifies them as an Apple application. This type of platform strategy is proving more and more successful, where innovation is sourced in the outside world, and they do this because Apple knows it doesn't have the capacity to create all the best applications themselves. They know that there are a far larger group of potential people who can do this out in the third world, or the external world, and they want to tie into this. So they create this platform strategy, and they use toolkits and other infrastructures to motivate people to write applications for the Apple platform. There are other types of innovation intermediaries. For example, InnoCentive or Nine Sigma are markets for ideas, just like eBay. So when companies have a problem they can't solve, they will post this problem on this marketplace, and then independent scientists, often coming from different walks of life and having different backgrounds, will try and propose different solutions to this, and then the winning solution will be awarded a cash prize, often a very significant cash prize, like $25,000 or something like this. These are third-party markets for ideas, for innovation, and facilitating the buying and trading and recombination of components of ideas like Lego blocks, you can think of them, and people recombine them. So the idea is innovation, or ideas can be bought and sold like a stock market security. There are many other new forms of innovation that are happening all the time that we don't understand very well, that we're experimenting with. For example, in the mobile industry, they're realizing one of the best forms of innovative ideas is coming out of the third world. So if you think about companies such as Nokia or Siemens, Sony Ericsson, or even the Android platforms or even the iPhone app, creating new applications that customers would like to pay for is a difficult challenge for them. What they're realizing, however, is in Africa, for example, where they don't have a tradition of many fixed landlines for a traditional landline telephone, many of the people have cell phones, but they're using them in a context, in a social context or an environmental context, that the engineers of the phones had never anticipated and never designed them to be used for. So we hear stories all the time about phones have to be redesigned to have multiple accounts, because typically they'll be used for a single village or several people in the village, or different forms of use for the cell phones that substitute basic technologies that we have here in the Western countries that they don't have there. So many companies like Nokia are sending their marketing researchers, their anthropologists out to India or Africa to identify good ideas as to how to bring potential innovations back to their more mature markets here in the West. Another model we're seeing are what are called living labs. And living laboratories are what we call rooms for quasi-experimentation, where we give people a bunch of technology and watch what we do with it. And this gets back to this idea that the engineer in the white lab coat probably can't think of all the possible uses, but people, when they get technologies, they do strange, unexpected things with them. And some of these things turn out to be quite good and quite useful. So living laboratories are a phenomena that are happening. They're quite popular here in Europe, also in Asia, where you create a context, you give people new technologies, and you let them experiment, and you watch what they do with it. So if people put a knife on their cell phone and start cutting vegetables, then you create a new product that does the same thing. All these different intermediary forms of cultivating innovation and bringing them back into the company and commercializing them are something that many companies are working with now, and these are exciting times to follow these. We are watching them. Some of them are proven, some of them are not proven in terms of viable ways for companies to move forward. Some of them are very valuable in some industries, but less in others. So if you think about the pharmaceutical industry, that has a certain business logic, which is based on massive investments into basic and applied pharmacology, and where 1 out of 50 products becomes a success and finances further research. That has one financial structure that permits cultivation and innovation in a certain form, where the technology markets have a completely different form of financial structure, which allow it to do things completely different than what the pharmacy industry does. These are some of the topics that we're doing lots of research on now, and we bring into the classroom the latest insights of what's going on in these different fields. Because once again, this idea of commercialization, of bringing to market in a sustainable business, is incredibly important. And these are some of the topics that we will emphasize very much in this program, innovation entrepreneurship.